You know what he did, of course. Sure. He was seeing me through to the outer office by then, where old Miss Hannah sat bashing away at her Underwood as she had ever since the last ice age had ended, it seemed. I was happy to go. All in all, I felt as if I'd gotten off easy. And it was nice to know there was a chance of surviving Percy, after all. You send Melinda a whole basket of my love, I said. And don't go buying you an extra crate of trouble, either? It'll probably turn out to be nothing but migraine, after all. You bet, he said, and below his sick eyes, his lips smiled. The combination was damned near ghoulish. As for me, I went back to E Block to start another day. There was paperwork to be read and written, there were floors to be mopped, there were meals to be served, a duty roster to be made out for the following week, there were 100 details to be seen too. But mostly there was waiting. In prison there's always plenty of that, so much it never gets done. Waiting for Edward Delacroix to walk the Green Mile, waiting for William Wharton to arrive with his curled lip and Billy the Kid tattoo, and, most of all, waiting for Percy Wetmore to be gone out of my life. Seven. Delacroix's mouse was one of God's mysteries. I never saw one in E Block before that summer, and never saw one after that fall, when Delacroix passed from our company on a hot and thundery night in October, passed from it in a manner so unspeakable I can barely bring myself to recall it. Delacroix claimed that he trained that mouse, which started its life among us as Steamboat Willie, but I really think it was the other way around. Dean Stanton felt the same way, and so did Brutal. Both of them were there the night the mouse put in its first appearance, and as Brutal said, the thing is half tame already, and twice as smart as that Cajun what thought he owned it. Dean and I were in my office, going over the record box for the last year, getting ready to write follow-up letters to witnesses of 5 executions, and to write follow-ups to follow-ups in another 6 stretching all the way back to 29. Basically, we wanted to know just one thing: were they pleased with the service? I know it sounds grotesque, but it was an important consideration. As taxpayers they were our customers, but very special ones. A man or a woman who will turn out at midnight to watch a man die has got a special, pressing reason to be there, a special need, and if execution is a proper punishment, then that need ought to be satisfied. They've had a nightmare. The purpose of the execution is to show them that the nightmare is over. Maybe it even works that way. Sometimes. Hey! Brutal called from outside the door, where he was manning the desk at the head of the hall. Hey, you two! Get out here! Dean and I gazed at each other with identical expressions of alarm, thinking that something had happened to either the Indian from Oklahoma, his name was Arlen Bitterbuck, but we called him the Chief or, in Harry Terwilliger's case, Chief Coat Cheese, because that was what Harry claimed Bitterbuck smelled like, or the fellow we called the President. But then Brutal started to laugh, and we hurried to see what was happening. Laughing in E-blocks sounded almost as wrong as laughing in church. Old Toot Toot, the trustee who ran the food wagon in those days, had been by with his holy rolling cart full of goodies, and Brutal had stocked up for a long night, 3 sandwiches, 2 pops, and a couple of moon pies. Also a side of potato salad Toot had undoubtedly filched from the prison kitchen, which was supposed to be off limits to him. Brutal had the logbook open in front of him, and for a wonder he hadn't spilled anything on it yet. Of course, he was just getting started. What? Dean asked. What is it? State legislature must have opened the purse strings enough to hire another screw this year after all, Brutal said, still laughing. Looky yonder. He pointed and we saw the mouse. I started to laugh, too, and Dean joined in. You really couldn't help it, because a guard doing quarter-hour check rounds was just like that mouse looked like, a tiny, furry guard making sure no one was trying to escape or commit suicide. It would trot a little way toward us along the Green Mile, then turn its head from side to side, as if checking the cells. Then it would make another forward spurt. The fact that we could hear both of our current inmates snoring away in spite of the yelling and the laughter somehow made it even funnier. It was a perfectly ordinary brown mouse, except for the way it seemed to be checking into the cells. It even went into one or two of them, skipping nimbly in between the lower bars in a way I imagine many of our inmates, past and present, would envy. Except it was out that the cons would always be wanting to skip, of course. The mouse didn't go into either of the occupied cells, only the empties. And finally it had worked its way almost up to where we were. I kept expecting it to turn back, but it didn't. It showed no fear of us at all. It ain't normal for a mouse to come up on people that way, Dean said, a little nervously. Maybe it's rabid. Oh, my Christ, Brutal said through a mouthful of corned beef sandwich. The big mouse expert. The mouse man. You see it foamin' at the mouth, mouse man? I can't see its mouth at all, Dean said, and that made us all laugh again.